The room smelled like expensive candles and my brother's ego. I stood near the back, still in my scrubs under my coat, because I'd driven 4 hours straight from the hospital and hadn't had time to change. My hair was pulled back in the same messy bun I'd worn through a 12-hour shift. I had a coffee stain on my left sleeve that I'd noticed somewhere around mile 200 and decided I didn't care enough to stop for. My brother didn't see me walk in. Neither did my mother. Neither did my father. That part wasn't surprising. I should explain something about my family before I go any further, because without context, none of this makes sense. My parents had 2 children, my brother Colt and me. Colt was born 11 months after me, which made us what people politely call Irish twins, and what my mother privately called her greatest accomplishment. I was never quite sure what that made me. Growing up, our house in Pensacola ran on a simple economy. Colt's needs were currency. Mine were overhead. He played baseball. My parents drove 2 hours to every game, both of them every weekend, rain or shine, from the time he was 7 until he graduated high school. I ran track. I set 3 county records my junior year. My father came to 1 meet and he left at halftime because Colt had a scrimmage. I'm not telling you this so you'll feel sorry for me. I'm telling you so you understand the math I grew up doing, the constant, exhausting arithmetic of figuring out exactly how much space I was allowed to take up. The answer was always a little less than Colt. My mother loved me. I believe that. But she loved me the way you love a houseplant that's doing fine. You're glad it's alive, you water it occasionally, and you mostly forget it's there. Colt was the garden she tended. I was the plant on the windowsill. I stopped resenting it around age 14 and started using it as fuel around age 16, which is probably the most useful thing my family ever accidentally gave me. I left for college on a full academic scholarship to the University of Florida. My parents drove Colt to his state school orientation the same week. I took a Greyhound bus. I want to be clear, I don't say that to be dramatic. I say it because it is exactly what happened, and it taught me something permanent about the distance between people who say they love you and people who actually show up. I put myself through the rest of school. Waitressed. Tutored. Wrote grant applications for a biology professor in exchange for lab access. Applied for every scholarship that existed and won enough of them that by the time I graduated summa cum laude with a degree in biochemistry, I owed exactly $4,000 in student loans, which I paid off in 8 months. My parents sent a card. It had a generic congratulations printed inside, and my mother had written "so proud" in blue ink. Colt called to tell me he'd gotten a promotion at the car dealership where he'd been working since dropping out of college after 2 semesters. Mom and Dad are taking me out to celebrate, he said. You should come. I was 300 miles away with no car. Can't make it, I said. Oh, okay. He didn't ask why. He never did. Medical school changed me in ways I'm still mapping. Johns Hopkins has a way of burning off everything soft and leaving only what's essential. I stopped sleeping regular hours. I stopped apologizing for being good at things. I developed a very specific kind of calm, the kind you grow when you have to make fast decisions with bad information in high-stakes situations, and you can't afford to panic because someone's chest is open on the table in front of you. I chose cardiothoracic surgery. My attending told me I had the hands for it and the temperament, meaning I didn't freeze, I didn't cry in the OR, and I could hold a position for 6 hours without complaint. I took that as a compliment. Some of the other residents took it as a warning. We were different kinds of people. My residency was brutal, in the way all surgical residencies are brutal. 30-hour shifts, holidays in the hospital. A Thanksgiving where I ate a granola bar and half a sandwich standing over a patient chart. I missed my cousin's wedding. I missed 2 Christmases. I missed my father's 65th birthday dinner, which, as my mother informed me in a voicemail, was very disappointing because she'd made his favorite pot roast. I called back and explained I'd been in surgery for 9 hours on a pediatric patient with a congenital heart defect. The child was 4 years old. She was alive because of what I did that day. My mother said, "Well, I hope you're taking care of yourself." I stopped calling as often after that. Not out of anger, out of conservation. Some relationships cost more than they give, and at some point you have to be honest about the balance sheet. I finished my residency and took a fellowship at Mayo Clinic in Rochester, then a position at a hospital in Atlanta. Then the offer came that I still can't quite believe I said yes to, a research and surgical position at Walter Reed, working with veterans and active-duty military personnel with complex cardiac cases. That job changed everything about how I understood what people are capable of. I operated on men and women who had been through things I will never comprehend. I learned to read a different kind of toughness. Not the sharp, performative kind, but the quiet, load-bearing kind. The kind that doesn't announce itself. I respected it enormously. After a while, I think I started to carry some of it myself. My name started appearing in journals. I co-authored a paper on minimally invasive valve repair that got cited 240 times in 18 months. I was asked to speak at conferences. I was appointed to a federal advisory panel on military cardiac care. I still had the coffee stain on my sleeve rotation. I still pulled my hair back in the same messy bun. Some things don't change. My brother got engaged. This was not in itself surprising. Colt had been dating the same woman for 4 years. A sweet, quiet woman named Becca, who worked in insurance, and had the particular patience of someone who had made peace with a lot of things. I liked her. I'd met her twice. My mother called me on a Tuesday evening, which was unusual because she typically only called on Sunday mornings and only for about 8 minutes. Colt proposed, she said. They're getting married in October. That's wonderful, I said. Please tell him congratulations. He wants you there, of course. A pause. We all do. I noticed the order she put that in. Colt first. Then the collective we, which I'd learned over the years was doing a lot of quiet work. I'll do my best, I said. It's October 17th. He's having a big engagement party in September, in Pensacola. I'll check my schedule. Your father is expecting you, she said, which was different from we'd love to see you, and she knew it. I checked my schedule. I had a conference in Dallas that weekend, but I could rearrange 2 days. I arranged them. I booked a flight. I did not announce this because in my experience, announcing plans to my family created expectations that functioned as obligations, and obligations in my family only ran one direction. The party was at my parents' house, which they'd renovated since I'd last been home. New kitchen, new deck out back, a pergola with string lights that my mother had obviously been planning for months. There were maybe 60 people there. Family, friends, neighbors, people from Colt's softball league, Becca's family, a few cousins I recognized by face but not by name. I arrived late because my flight was delayed. I texted my mother. She hadn't responded. I walked in through the back gate because the front door had a crowd around it. I was wearing the queenest thing I'd packed, which was a dark green dress I'd bought for a hospital gala 3 years ago and worn twice. I still had my hospital badge clipped to my bag by accident. I pulled it off and stuck it in my pocket. My father was holding court near the coolers, telling a story I'd heard approximately 40 times, something about a fishing trip in 1987. His audience was laughing. He looked good. Heavier than when I'd last seen him, but good. Happy. He didn't look up when I came in. Colt saw me from across the yard. He waved in the general direction of my face, the way you wave at a neighbor you're friendly with, but don't know well, and then turned back to the group he was standing with. I got a drink. I stood near the edge of the deck. I watched my family exist without me, which I had a lot of practice doing. My mother found me after about 20 minutes. You came, she said, and she hugged me, and she smelled like the same perfume she'd worn my entire life, and something inside me went complicated in a way I've never figured out how to explain. I came, I said. You look tired. I just flew in from Dallas. You should eat something. There's potato salad. And that was more or less the conversation. She moved on to greet someone else. Someone whose name she said with warmth and recognition. And I stood there with my drink and my potato salad and thought about the 4-hour flight and the calendar I'd rearranged to be standing on this specific patch of deck at this specific party. Colt came over eventually. He was sunburned and cheerful, wearing a polo shirt with his name embroidered on it, which his team at the dealership had apparently given him as a joke that had become sincere. Hey, you made it, he said. I made it. Mom said you were maybe coming. He popped a chip in his mouth. Becca's excited to see you. She thinks you're cool. I like Becca, I said. Yeah, she's great. He looked around the yard with the easy satisfaction of a man in the center of a room that was built for him. "You want to meet some people? My buddy Ryan's here. He stopped. He was looking at something over my shoulder. I turned. 3 men had come in through the back gate. They were in civilian clothes, slacks, collared shirts, but there was something about the way they moved, the way they held themselves, that you learn to read after enough time at Walter Reed. These were military men in civilian clothes, which is a different thing from civilians. "Becca's dad invited some guys from the base," Colt said a little uncertainly. "He does some consulting with them or something." One of the men caught my eye from across the yard. He stopped walking. His name was Colonel James Whitaker. I had operated on his heart 14 months ago. A complex bypass, high risk, complicated by scar tissue from an earlier procedure that a different surgeon had done in a hurry. He had spent 4 hours on my table. His wife had waited in the chair outside the OR and cried quietly the entire time, which I knew because one of the nurses told me afterward. He was alive because of what I'd done. He said something to the man beside him. Then he started walking toward me. Colt had gotten distracted by someone calling his name, so he drifted away just as Colonel Whitaker crossed the yard. My brother has always had excellent timing. "Dr. Callahan," Whitaker said, and he extended his hand, and his grip was the grip of someone who meant it. "I didn't know you'd be here." "Small world," I said. "Becca's father is a friend of mine." He looked genuinely surprised, in the unguarded way that men who spend their lives not looking surprised sometimes allow themselves. "How are you? You look good." "I'm good." "You look better than the last time I saw you." He laughed. "That's a low bar." "It is," I agreed. We talked for a few minutes, the easy, warm conversation of 2 people who have been through something together and come out the other side. He asked about my work. I told him about the new research program. He told me his last checkup had been excellent, that the cardiologists he'd followed up with had used the word textbook twice. I noticed at some point that my mother had drifted closer. She was pretending to look at the string lights. "My wife asks about you," Whitaker said. "She still talks about the day of the surgery. She said one of the nurses told her after, when I was out of the woods, that you'd been in OR 3 for 4 hours and you'd never sat down once." "The chair in that OR squeaks," I said. "It's distracting." He laughed again. Then his expression shifted to something quieter. "I mean it. What you did, I have grandchildren I wouldn't have met. I want you to know that." I wasn't sure what to say to that, so I just nodded. That was when Colt reappeared. He had someone with him, one of his friends from the softball league, a heavy-set man with a friendly face and a beer. He was doing the thing he always did at parties, which was collect people and bring them places, performing the role of connector, host, center of gravity. "Hey," Colt said, coming up beside Whitaker without seeming to notice who he was. "You finding everything okay?" "My fiance's dad knows some guys from the base." "I know Dr. Callahan," Whitaker said. He said it simply, the way you state a fact. Colt looked at me. Then at Whitaker. "Who?" I watched the moment register on Whitaker's face, the slight stillness, the recalibration. He looked at Colt. He looked at me. I kept my expression completely neutral because I had spent years learning how to have a face that gave nothing away. "Your sister," Whitaker said. Colt blinked. "She's not, yeah, that's my sister." "Dr. Callahan is a cardiothoracic surgeon at Walter Reed," Whitaker said. The warmth in his voice hadn't changed, but something underneath it had sharpened. "She performed my bypass surgery last year. I wouldn't be standing here without her." The man with the beer went very still. Colt's smile stayed in place the way smiles do when the brain hasn't yet told the face what's happening. My mother, who had stopped pretending to look at the lights, was now simply standing there with her glass of white wine and an expression I didn't have words for. My father had turned from the cooler. He was watching. "She saved my life," Whitaker said, "and the lives of a lot of men and women who serve this country. She's one of the most talented surgeons I've had the privilege of knowing." The softball friend looked at me with an expression of total, uncomplicated respect and said, "Damn." And then he shook my hand. And the hand I shook was warm and genuine, and it was the only thing in that yard in that moment that didn't feel complicated. I did not make a speech. I did not say I told you so, or now do you see me, or any of the other lines that had occasionally rehearsed themselves in my head over the years during weaker moments. I was 31 years old, and I had stood in operating rooms and made decisions that kept people alive, and I was not going to stand in my parents' backyard and perform the scene that everyone was now quietly braced for. Colt said, "Wow, I knew you were a doctor, but I didn't realize surgeon," I said. "Cardiothoracic." Right. Yeah. My mother said my name. Just my name. Laurel. The way she said it had something in it I couldn't quite name. Something between recognition and apology, and something older and more complicated than either. I looked at her. I smiled. It was a real smile, not a performance. Just the particular, measured smile of someone who has already done the work of deciding not to be destroyed by the people who should have known better. "I'm going to get some more water," I said. It was great to see everyone. I walked to the drink table. Colonel Whitaker followed me, and we stood there in the fading September light and talked about his granddaughter's soccer tournament and a paper I was thinking about submitting to the Journal of Thoracic and Cardiovascular Surgery. And it was the best conversation I had at that party. I left around 8:30. I had an early flight. My mother walked me to the gate. She was quiet the whole way, which was its own kind of communication. At the gate, she stopped and looked at me with an expression that I think she meant as an opening. "I didn't know," she said. "I didn't realize how much you'd—" "I know," I said. "We should talk more, call more." "Sure," I said. I don't say that to be cruel. I say it because it was the honest answer, which is the only kind I how to give anymore. Maybe we will call more. Maybe things shift. I'm not close to it. I'm just not counting on it, because I spent too many years counting on things that didn't come, and I know what that arithmetic does to you over time. I hugged her. She held on a beat longer than usual. I let her. Then I walked to my rental car and I drove to the hotel I'd booked near the airport, and I took the world's longest shower, and I ate a room service burger at 10 o'clock at night, and I watched 30 minutes of a documentary about ocean currents, and I fell asleep before it ended. Some nights, when I'm back in Atlanta and the hospital is quiet and I've finished my charts, I sit by the window in my apartment and drink coffee that's too strong and look at the city lights. I don't think about my family as much as you might expect. I think about the 4-year-old with the congenital defect who is now, presumably, in 2nd grade somewhere. I think about Colonel Whitaker's granddaughter at her soccer tournament. I think about the stack of cases on my desk and which ones I want to take to the research committee. I think about the life I built in the years when nobody was paying attention, the scholarship I won by myself, the bus I took alone, the labs I stayed in until 2 in the morning because I wanted to know how things worked, and there was nobody home waiting for me and nothing to rush back to. People sometimes hear my story and they want to know if I'm angry, if I've forgiven my family, if the party changed anything. I tell them the truth, which is that I don't spend much time on anger anymore. Anger is expensive and I have better things to fund. Forgiveness is a project I've been doing quietly for years. Not for them, but for me, because carrying it was getting heavy and I needed both hands free. What changed at the party was nothing and everything. Nothing, because my family is still my family and people don't transform over wine and potato salad in an evening. Everything, because something in that yard rearranged itself. Some old story I'd been telling myself got edited, just slightly, by the look on my mother's face when she heard someone she respected say my name with weight behind it. I don't need my family to see me to know who I am. I established that a long time ago. But it turns out there's still something in me that noticed when they finally did. I'm still figuring out what to do with that. For now, I pour my coffee, I watch the lights, and I let it be complicated. Some things don't need to be resolved. They just need to be carried gently until they get lighter. Mine gets lighter every year. There's something nobody tells you about building a life in the dark, which is that the dark is actually very good conditions for building. Nobody's watching. Nobody's critiquing. Nobody's taking credit. You just put one thing on top of another, quietly, for years, and one day you look up and there's something real standing there that you made entirely by yourself. That's what I think about when I think about my own story. Not the party, not the yard, not the moment Colonel Whitaker said my name and the air shifted. I think about the Greyhound bus, the 2 a.m. lab, the granola bar on Thanksgiving, the $4,000 I paid off in 8 months because I had decided, somewhere around age 16, that I was going to live a life that didn't require anyone's permission. The choices I made weren't heroic. They were just consistent. I showed up when it was hard. I stayed when I wanted to quit. I kept my word to myself even when nobody else was keeping theirs to me. That's not a talent. It's a decision you make over and over in small moments when nobody's looking. That's what people mean when they talk about character. It's not the big moments. It's the accumulation of the small ones. I think about the 4-year-old on my table and what it cost me to be good enough to save her. Every sacrifice I made in training was, in some indirect way, a link in the chain that led to her being alive. Nothing is wasted. The hard years don't disappear. They compound. They become the skill and the steadiness and the hands that know what to do when everything is on the line. And I think about my family. Not with bitterness, I did that work already and it's mostly done. I think about them with something closer to clarity. The neglect I experienced was real, its effects were real, but so was what I built because of it. Both things are true. I'm not grateful for the pain, but I'm honest about what it produced. It produced someone who learned very early that the only person she could count on was herself, and then spent years making herself worth counting on. That's the part I want people to hear, not the catharsis in the backyard. That was one evening, one moment, one man saying one true thing out loud. What matters is the 15 years before that moment. The studying, the choosing difficult over comfortable again and again. The decision to let my integrity be the loudest thing about me even when nobody was listening. Cold asked who I was, and I understand why he didn't know. I was gone. I was quiet. I was building something in a direction nobody in that family was facing, but I knew who I was. I had known for a long time. That knowledge, earned, not given, is the only thing nobody can take back from you. Not a dismissive brother, not an inattentive parent, not any room that forgot to look your way. You carry it in your hands and your work and the decisions you make at 2 a.m. when the easy choice is right there and you pick the harder one anyway. That's what I carry out of my own story. Not the moment the room went quiet. The years of noise that nobody heard but me.